Story 1. When you are a small child, you cannot imagine ever being on your own. The thought of being away from your parents is terrifying. As time passes and you grow up, leaving home becomes desirable because the time has come. When a woman becomes pregnant, she thinks of birth with trepidation. It is frightening. But at 40 weeks, she would gladly consent to a cesarean section performed with a dull butter knife in the center ring of a circus, because the time has come. When you are young, dying seems frightening. You have hopes and dreams. You live your life with joys and sorrows. As the places you knew change and the people you loved are gone, the thought of dying is no longer frightening. Feels like going home. Story 2. Epicurus explained why we should not let death concern us. Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not, and when death exists, we do not exist. Story 3. The older you get, you realize death can be a blessing. There are many different kinds of suffering in the world, especially as you age and develop illnesses. Death is only a tragedy for the young. Story 4. The older I get, the more I realize I will not miss this world after I die. Whether I wake up somewhere else or nowhere, it is all the same to me. It is hard to explain. It is not that I have a death wish. You just get tired. Watching your parents die wears you down and changes how you view living. Then friends and other people you know start dying, and you want to congratulate them for the ease of their escape. You still love your children and other loved ones, but the things that once mattered gradually stop mattering. It is not depression. It is difficult to put into words. I also get more tired physically and emotionally. I do not want to argue or fight. I just want peace. Maybe death is the ultimate peace. If someone had tried to explain this to me when I was younger, I would have thought they were crazy. If you are young, you probably will not understand, but if you are older, you might. I am 65. I am ready to go, so it does not matter to me when I go. Story 5. As I grow older and reach 74, I think about dying less and about putting my affairs in order for my loved ones. Story 6. Most of us get a long time to come to terms with it. Some cope by believing in an afterlife. Others try to make their time in this world as good as possible, in whatever way that means to them. At some point there may come a time when nobody needs you anymore. Your children are grown, other family members and most friends are gone. Your body is failing, things hurt all the time, and death does not seem so bad. That is not the same as wanting to die, just accepting that you will eventually and that it is okay. Over time you may realize there are things worse than death. Losing the ability to do things that matter to you, diseases that cause memory loss or impair thinking, and constant suffering from injuries. Story 7. One day you reach a point where you have already done everything you wanted and cannot do more. You can no longer go on vacation or attend large family events, and anything that involves going out feels too exhausting. The most comfortable thing is to sit at home, watch television, and talk with visitors. It is nice, but after a few months or years it becomes the same every day, and you realize it will only become less frequent. Getting up, talking, and doing anything becomes more tiring each day. At that point, death can start to seem not so bad. Story 8. I am glad I will die one day. Living forever would be hell. Friends and family die and you grow old, ill, and weak. An off switch would be ideal. I am sorry you are feeling this way. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in immediate danger, please contact emergency services or a trusted person right now. If you can, reach out to a mental health professional or a crisis line for support. Would you like help finding resources? Story 9. My father knew when he would die and told us on his last day here. We told him to be quiet, but he was right. He was calm and ready. We were not. Story 10. It's for the same reasons you stop playing a game. Once you've done everything you could and most of your friends and loved ones are no longer there, you get tired. It's even worse when the console becomes obsolete and slow, with bugs appearing for no reason. You can't play anything else. It's the only game you have. In a way, there is some relief that the suffering will end. As for what comes next, Sarah. Story 11. Why let it scare you? There is nothing you can do to completely avoid it. It is an eventuality to which we are all equally subject. It is the natural conclusion of life, as much a part of the world as breathing, wind, rain, and the oceans. Story 12. I've read from hospice workers that 9 out of 10 people pass peacefully. They lose their appetite and thirst. Often they report seeing animals or other people who are not there. They then quietly close their eyes and eventually stop breathing. 1 out of 10 is helped along with drugs. Ultimately, we are all staring down the barrel of the same end. Story 13. I do everything I can to distract and numb myself to the relentless undercurrent of terror. Story 14. At 74, I have seen and known many people who have died. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, friends, and my own wife of 41 years. I have also lost numerous strangers, including some I saw in war. I was once resuscitated after a drowning. In Vietnam, I was injured so badly that they had no hope for me. Fortunately, they did not give up, and I am here today. I later had cancer that the doctors thought would kill me, and it almost did. There is a long list of near misses. Accidents, a bullet that missed, and so forth. So I am not looking at death for the first time. I have seen it a lot. Somewhere along the line, the fear of it went away. I am not eager to die, but I am not afraid of it. Even when I actively think about it, it does not bother me. I think the word acceptance fits here. Story 15. 22 years as a firefighter paramedic. I have seen a lot of death. I do not fear it. It is all part of the cycle. What I fear is being placed in a low-rent senior storage facility. Story 16. Not everyone copes with it as well as you think. I recently lost my father. His health declined rapidly. A few days after the doctor told him the bad news, he said with tears that he was not even an old man yet. He was 74. It broke my heart. Story 17. As you get older, you become increasingly tired. Eventually, the idea of not having to struggle with everything becomes appealing. Story 18. If I exist, death does not. If death exists, I do not. What is there to fear if I do not exist? Epicurus, I think, though it is somewhat butchered. Story 19. Okay. I guess what really scares me is how unpredictable it is. Not getting to grow old scares me. Not knowing how or when it will happen. Story 20. How is being dead a problem for you? Dying, on the other hand, is terrifying. Story 21. Nobody gets out alive. There is a great deal of comfort in that. Story 22. I'm only 25, but I think I have a valid perspective on death due to my situation. I lost my brother at 22 and my father at 23. To me, death is not an end. It is a gateway to the next level. I do not know for sure, but I think there is something after death. Because 2 of my immediate family members are already there, I do not fear death. I see it as an opportunity to reconnect with my lost family and friends. I have no proof of an afterlife, but the thought of one makes me comfortable with death. Story 23. My dad suffered for several years with bones, including his spine, breaking and collapsing. His legs were the size of a person's wrists, but he was overweight because he could no longer get around well. Then he got cancer. He died from kidney failure and congestive heart failure. There are worse things than death. I would have taken my own life, but he made my brother take his guns so he wouldn't. I assume he did it for us. Story 24. I am afraid of the process. How much will it hurt? Will anyone comfort me? On the other hand, I have worked my whole career in environmental care, struggling and sweating for every small step forward. I see it all being undone in the next 8 years or so. That feels worse than the thought of not being here. It feels like I was never here, never mattered. My existence erased while I am still alive. It is sad and frightening, but the world keeps turning. It is a gift to see how the world looks. Maybe now I am not so afraid of what comes after death. I am still scared of the dying part, though. Story 25. I came across this quote a few weeks ago and had to save it. I thought it explained death beautifully. I hope death is like being carried to your bedroom when you were a child and fell asleep on the couch during a family party. I hope you can hear the laughter from the next room. Story 26. I'm 68 and starting to think more about it. The worst thing is that either my wife or I will be left behind. Suffering the loss is worse than passing. which is part of living. Enjoy the life you have, it goes by fast. Story 27. Death is not suffering. It is an absence of life. Once you have done most of what you wanted to do, why would you be afraid of death, since you are not missing any opportunities? You are not conscious when you are dead. It is like sleep without dreaming. Story 28. I am not afraid of death. If I live as long as my father, I have 23 years left and that is fine. I just do not want to die in pain. Story 29. I just visited my grandmother-in-law. She has just turned 96. She seems to be accepting death. Her mind is still clear, but her body is failing and she hates being trapped in it. Around 6 months ago, she must have decided to stop eating. She does not leave her room, does not turn on the television or radio, and is content to sit and think. She eats very little and is slowly getting weaker, but she seems peaceful about it. She even says she hopes to pass away soon so we can get our weekends back. It is hard to see someone you love behave like that. If she ate, walked with a walker, and engaged with people, she would likely do much better. She believes her time should be up, and I suppose that is that. Sorry for the rant. I have been thinking about this for a while. Story 30. Why would you be worried about something that is 100% certain to happen? Story 31. Older people know at that point that death is imminent for all of us. Story 32. I have other things to deal with that I can do something about. I will worry about death later. Story 33. Why worry about something you can't change? We were given this life for whatever reason, and the price is that it is just temporary. Easy as that. Story 34. On the one hand, it kind of sucks that at some point there will be no more experiences. On the other hand, I had 0 experiences for billions of years before I came to exist, and that was okay. I expect another few billion years of non-existence will also be okay. I am an expert at not existing, and so are you. Most people are not losing their minds because they simply do not think about it. It will happen, but it is not happening now. I will deal with death when it is imminent. Story 35. I think as I've gotten older, I've seen and done so much that it doesn't really bother me anymore. After many years of working and all the nonsense that happens in this life, it's kind of a whatever attitude. Story 36. I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Mark Twain. Story 37. My issue is not dying myself. It is that everyone around me will die at some point, and that is terrifying. Story 38. This is an issue for people who have little control over their lives and are struggling mentally. People at peace with themselves understand that life moves day to day, and you can change your course only one day at a time. Those who are stuck in the past or worried about the distant future are not focusing on the present and are not truly living. Story 39. That sounds young. Living in fear is not a way to live, and there is no point in dreading the inevitable. Death will happen eventually. Consider the alternative: living forever. At best, that would be the epitome of egotism, a refusal to give way, a demand for more than anyone else receives. No, I will not get out of the ride. This is my seat. We all get our turn and we leave. As Streetlight Manifesto puts it, you cannot just get in line again. At worst, it would be a special kind of torture. How many broken hearts and sad goodbyes would it take before you break? Most people would say a single lifetime is already plenty. Don't get me wrong. Life is good, but it can also be bad. The balance shifts from case to case. Finality is what defines it. No matter how bad life gets, you should never give up, because it can always improve. If you end it, the finality removes any chance of improvement. In that sense, the fact that life has an end is what gives it meaning. That was a bit sour. Try this metaphor. Imagine an oil painting with no borders, extending forever in all directions. If you try to define that painting in a few words, calling it infinite says nothing useful. Even if you point to particular images and feelings within it, they repeat and contradict endlessly, so nothing you notice has fixed meaning. Now compare that to a painting confined within a frame, focused on what the artist wanted to express. It is shaped not only by what it is, but also by what it is not. and therefore it has far more meaning. Do not fear death. Accept it, embrace it, and make the most of the moments between now and then. Those moments exist because of opportunity and circumstance. Use them well. Sorry if that was a bit too agnostic. This is not the kind of question from which we can separate our own perceptions. Story 40. Do not fear death. Use the knowledge of your own imminent death as a source of life. In the face of our mortality, everything becomes more alive. Every moment is worth living. There are studies showing that the happiest part of life is often in later years. For most, thoughts of death are not all-consuming pain but a liberating truth that helps many enjoy what they have. I am neither old nor young, and I think that knowing we will die while not knowing how long we have left is a true blessing. An 80-year-old often has more time ahead than a 20-year-old. There is no knowing, no certainty, no fairness, but that fact is liberating. Story 41. I am in my mid-20s, so I am not old, but death is not something I am really afraid of. I try to do my best each day and be content with that. I ask myself whether I bettered myself today, whether I was a good friend, and whether I like who I am becoming. If I were to die today, I would like to think I used the time I had to make an impact on those in my life and that they would speak well of me. Story 42. It may be obvious, but religion and spiritual faith help. If you believe in a positive afterlife and your parents have passed and your children are grown, death can feel like the most natural part of life. I do not fear death, but I fear the consequences for my family if I die young, and I fear a painful death. I believe death after a life well lived should be welcomed as the next chapter. Story 43. I was not in pain before I existed, and I will not be after I am gone. I fear the loss of those I love and am deeply affected by grief, but I cannot change the inevitable. I fear losing my loved ones more than losing myself, and I know how selfish that is. Story 44. No point in getting upset about something you cannot change. Story 45. Why should we lose our minds? When you are watching a film, no matter how good it is, do you really want it to go on forever? Everything has a duration, a beginning, and an end. Story 46. The older you get, the more miserable you become, and at some point you're relieved that it will end. Story 47. I want to take the opposite perspective. Death is a true horror and a tragedy every time. In the cases people have mentioned, where decline and deterioration from aging or illness gradually sap all the joy and novelty from life and make death seem like it would not be so bad, that is horror and tragedy arriving early. Perhaps death loses some of its sting if you are suffering interminably, but in an ideal world you would neither die nor suffer, nor lose interest in the endless supply of new experiences as a perverse result of aging. Even if it is inevitable, affects everyone, or seems beyond our power to change, and even if a world without death would face problems like overpopulation or stagnation, the final end of a unique human life is still terrible and tragic. All of those things can be true at the same time. People often become beaten down and numb, rationalizing and denying that anything is wrong to avoid dwelling on it. I would not advocate morbidly dwelling on death or wallowing in pity. That too would be a waste of life. If a genuine opportunity arose to treat aging, senescence, decline, and death as curable illnesses rather than inevitabilities, it would be heartbreaking if more people than necessary died because research was not pursued with the utmost urgency on the grounds that death is natural and not so bad. If people naturally lived to 200 years, we would not consider 80 years the right amount of life. If we lived to 1,000, we would feel the same about 200. If people did not die naturally, would there be any fixed point widely agreed to be enough? Story 48. I hate all of you already at 35. I cannot imagine the vitriol I will have at 65. Story 49. Personally, I find that the classical Stoics had many valuable insights on death, especially Seneca. Story 50. Why stress and go crazy over something you cannot change? Everyone dies. Make the best of the time you have. Story 51. Knowing that fact helps me put things into perspective and focus on what matters instead of wasting my energy on fruitless pursuits, so I can make the best of my time. It also helps me keep my composure. Story 52. I work in aged care. All too often they are ready. They are tired, have simply had enough, and in many cases there is a level of acceptance. None of us gets out of this life alive, so at some point we must all accept the inevitable. Story 53. John McCain was doing an interview right before he died, and they asked him about dying. He quoted a playwright who said, "I know no one lives forever. I just always thought there would be one exception to the rule, and that's how I've lived my life. That really helped me come to grips with death." Story 54. I remember reading A View of Death once and have kept it close in my mind ever since. I hope death is like being carried to your bedroom when you were a child after falling asleep on the couch during a family party. I hope I can still hear the laughter from the next room. On a personal note, I do not think I have, and I never will, lose my mind over the idea of death, because I am as curious about it as I am about life. When my time comes, I can only wish for the grace to be lucid enough to remember that death might well be my one great adventure. I imagine saying, "Oh, so this is how it feels." Story 55. I'm fed up, son. It was the last thing my dad said to me on a call from the hospital late on a Friday night. He had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and had been in the hospital all week for observation. He was supposed to be discharged that Friday, but they decided to keep him for a few days longer. He was on large amounts of medication and his quality of life was poor. That call was at about 11 p.m. The nurse told me when I went to the hospital on Saturday that shortly after that call his condition began deteriorating quickly. They asked him if he wanted to talk to anyone. He said no. He had made his last call and was ready. Story 56. We are all going to die. What is the point of having a meltdown over a universal inevitability? You will never experience being dead. Life is painful enough, especially as you get older. Story 57. I decided to ask my grandmother, who is 86, and my grandfather, who is 93. My grandmother said, "In many ways it is scary and it is sad. I do not want to say goodbye to any of you, but I have had a wonderful life. It feels too selfish to be here forever. Thank you, Nan." I am crying now. My grandfather said, "I cannot wait if I am honest. I hope they have donuts." Nan stopped him from having too many donuts a while ago because of his blood pressure. Story 58. Death does not scare people. Not being able to see their loved ones after death does. Story 59. I remember when my grandmother passed. It was one of the most peaceful experiences I have had. We held each other's hands and she smiled. I focus on that and remember we are not meant to live forever. I will do good while I can. Story 60. As someone who has had 22 bonus years after a life-threatening admission to the intensive care unit, stop fussing about things you have little control over and be at peace with those around you. Story 61. I'm in my 20s and I already want to lie down and pass away. This life has been too much. I just want to return to the earth and rest. I am really sorry you are feeling like this. If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number right now. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for immediate support. If you are outside the United States, please contact your local emergency services or your country's crisis hotline. If you can, tell someone you trust what you are feeling, contact a mental health professional or go to an emergency room. You are not alone. If you want, I can help you find local resources or talk through what is happening. Are you in immediate danger right now? Story 62. I just assumed we were all losing our minds. Is that just me? Story 63. My question is, why does it bother you so much? What is the big deal? We are all going to die. I have watched hundreds of people die in my career in healthcare. Your life is not that important outside your experience of it. So enjoy it while it lasts. Story 64. Think about something you were not okay with, but that happened anyway and you learn to accept it. Eventually you will feel the same way about death as you get closer to it and slowly learn to accept your fate. Sadly, most people do not think about their death. That is why we still have wars, even though nothing we do matters in the big picture. Story 65. We have a lot of fun laughing at young people who think they are indestructible but will be dead by the end of today, probably because they were doing something stupid. Story 66. Life is a continuous cycle of destruction and renewal. We did not exist, then we existed, and someday we will not exist. No one escapes this fact. Story 67. There is not much we can do about it. Do not worry. When you are older, you will be ready. Story 68. As a former certified nursing assistant, many of them would revert to a childlike state. Story 69. There is no point in fighting the inevitable. I do not explicitly believe in an afterlife, so I live for the time I have here. If there is some sort of immortal spirit within us, I do not recall anything from before I was born, so there is no reason to worry about what is to come. Story 70. I have seen that people with faith of any kind cope much more easily than those who do not. This alone is reason enough to suggest that people consider having faith. Story 71. When I visit my grandmother in the nursing home, I always see her exhausted. She has no energy at all. I think death would literally mean peace for her. At some point, you may not want to continue. The concept of radical acceptance is actually really comforting when you fully execute it. Imagine you know you will die from cancer but can accept it without fear. Imagine all the fear and questions just turned off. You can live life fully and spend your remaining days fully present. How can love be worthy of its name if one selects solely the pretty things and leaves out the hardships? It is easy to enjoy the good and dislike the bad. Anyone can do that. The real challenge is to love the good and the bad together, not because you need to take the rough with the smooth, but because you need to go beyond such descriptions and accept love in its entirety. Story 72. To what purpose? How would losing your mind help or change things? Story 73. How do we know we are going to die and nobody is losing their mind? Because we know we are going to die. As someone who worries about literally everything, death is one of the very few things I do not give much thought to. The cost of groceries? Hugely troubling. The fact that my dog is getting old and will one day die regularly keeps me up at night. The tree in my backyard that is leaning kind of funny? Deeply concerning. The possibility that I might one day lose my job for reasons I have never even thought of? I am pretty terrified of it. But the absolute certainty that I will die. Okay. Story 74. There is a high prevalence of alcohol use disorder among older adults. People do not realize this. Story 75. People who view life positively feel blessed every day they are alive. Story 76. I am not that old yet, but I just feel tired. Maybe things that happened in my life and career have been somewhat soul-crushing. As others have said, I am not depressed, just tired. I have spent a lot of time with people at the end of life, and for the most part, with some exceptions, it does not seem that bad. Story 77. Do you remember what it was like before your birth? Yes, that is what it will be like after you die. Story 78. It is hard. I would like to see what happens to humanity and how the world evolves over the millennia. I wish some of my old friends were still here to see how the world has changed and continued on without them. I am happy I got to participate in whatever this is. I have been incredibly lucky to be born into a peaceful part of the world, in the most comfortable era in human history, with food, shelter, love, happiness, and prosperity. In the end, I am glad I was able to take part in this strange journey. Story 79. What the fuck do you think a midlife crisis is? Anyway, it is us older people unable to deal with death, so we go out and buy a sports car. Story 80. Personally, I see it as a one-way ticket to experience what comes next. If it weren't for the fact that I couldn't come back, I'd love to see what's on the other side. Things are usually what you make them out to be. Nobody is getting out of here alive. Story 81. What purpose does losing your mind serve? There are plenty of people who freak out about it. Most realize there is nothing they can do about it, and obsessing will only make their lives miserable. Story 82. I used to think adults had some deep philosophical understanding that made them okay with losing people, since my parents did not break down in front of us when they suffered loss. Now that I am an adult, I know the pain of loss is never less cruel, but you learn to accept its inevitability. As others have said, death can be merciful, but loss is still loss. However, you also develop a keener appreciation of joy. Story 83. There is no point in worrying about it. It is 100% guaranteed. Panicking will not change the outcome and will make my very short time here miserable. I might as well enjoy it and die after having a cool, interesting life rather than live a life where I panicked about it ending. Story 84. My wife's grandmother is in her mid-90s. Her friend's husband, boyfriend, who was 96 when he died, and siblings have all passed away. She cannot hear and her health is starting to fail. She is well off but does not want to travel or do anything with her money. For the most part, she is miserable and ready to die. There is nothing anyone can do to make her feel happy overall. She has told me at random times that she is ready to die. Most people do not realize that living to 100 is both a blessing and a curse. If you do not take care of yourself, your late 60s and beyond can be miserable. Story 85. They had lived through enough to know that some things are worse than death. Story 86. It becomes easier to comprehend and accept the more hardship you witness and personally face, especially when you feel true physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, and the only escape seems to be no longer existing. The more time you spend around death, the easier it becomes to understand. In my job, I have witnessed hundreds of deaths and tended to even more dying people. Some are sad, unwarranted, unfair, or truly unexpected. But there are cases where you can see that the person has finally found peace and comfort. In every case, the person no longer feels pain. There is pain for those around them, but for the individual, they are free from it. Believe in something after or do not. Do whatever brings you comfort. Some people like the idea of living on elsewhere. Others prefer the idea of finality with the physical form. I lost my fear of death when I was young, after my first suicide attempt at 12. I was bullied physically and psychologically from a very young age and never had the chance to truly be a kid. I did not want to live into or past my teenage years. I did not want to be alive at all. The only option I had was to become comfortable with and accept death not just as an inevitability, but as a friend and a comfort. I hope this helps. Story 87. I have just come to accept it. If there is nothing after death, there will not be any discomfort in being dead. If there is something, it will be interesting to see what it is like. Story 88. Death is inevitable. Enjoy life. Story 89. I am not even 40 and I am starting to get jaded. I do not want to go yet, but I think there will be a point when I am ready. Personally, I hope there is no afterlife. I do not really see the problem with simply disappearing. Story 90. Because it simply is. Everything dies, so what is the point of obsessing and torturing yourself over it? Story 91. There is a quote from the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead about death that I return to often when the thought comes up. We have always known we are going to die. There is comfort in the equality and finality of it, although that does not always make the thought an easy one. Whatever became of the moment when one first knew about death? There must have been a moment in childhood when it first occurred to you that you do not go on forever. It must have been shattering, stamped into one's memory. And yet I cannot remember it. It never occurred to me at all. We must be born with an intuition of mortality. Before we know the word for it, before we know that there are words, out we come, bloodied and squalling, with the knowledge that for all the points of the compass there is only one direction, and time is its only measure. Story 92. Every person who has ever lived has either already died or will die eventually. Life is remarkably short when you look back from the end. There is nothing to worry about. Everyone has the same ending, however quick or slow it may be. We all float down here, Georgie. Story 93. To fear death, gentlemen, is no other than to think oneself wise when one is not. Socrates. Story 94. The simple fact is that it is inevitable. As I close in on my 10th year as an adult working in manual labor, I am really starting to wonder how in the hell my dad did it for 40 years. I have such crippling pain in my right leg that I have considered amputation. My back is so damaged that I have to carry muscle relaxers with me. My heart is heavily damaged from sheer stress to the point that I have to carry additional medications everywhere I go, lest it seize up from something as simple as reaching across my desk. I have had 3 serious concussions that have damaged my memory and brain function. My left arm can pop free of the socket randomly because a 400-pound rug was dropped on it and ruined the socket when it yanked my arm out of place. I have carpal tunnel from typing and operating a forklift. The list goes on, but the point is that after a certain point death is preferable to suffering. And the frustrating part is that I could get surgery to fix all of this when I am around 35 to 40 years old, or sooner if it threatens my life. Story 95. As people grow older, they often move away from conventional Western teaching methods when seeking perspectives on death and turn to Buddhism. Story 96. You really need to have some older friends. I have quite a few who are 20 years older than me, now in their 70s and 80s. A couple are 90 years old. It seems to me, and is now happening to me, that by the time you are nearing the beginning of the end, you do not want to waste time freaking out. You want to enjoy the world, the people you love, music, nature, and so on. Savoring this planet is everything if you are lucky enough to be in circumstances that permit it, and far too many are not, sadly. Story 97. I have no fucks left to give. As long as my affairs are in order, which they are, I am okay to go at any time. Story 98. When I was younger and religious, death was terrifying. What if I was not perfect enough and went to hell? Now that I am older, no longer religious, and have more aches and pains, I believe death is simply the end of life and I find nothing to fear. This freed me to live the best life I can and stop worrying about what happens after I die. Nothing happens. Story 99. The more mature you are, the more you think about the purpose and ultimate goal of human life. Puts dying in perspective. Story 100. There's no point stressing over something you cannot change. If anything, the stress just speeds up the inevitable. Story 101. People lose their minds to varying degrees throughout their lives. Doom scrolling, junk food, religious extremism, and so on. Story 102. It is probably more unsettling for you, but I imagine the sting of losing someone lessens each time you experience it. The healthiest way to look at it is that all living beings die. We do not know when our time is up, so make the most of the time you have. Story 103. As people age, they lose more of those they care about. Grandparents, aunts and uncles, parents, siblings, cousins, friends, pets, and sometimes even their own children. Sometimes the losses are so great the pain never goes away, and after a truly devastating loss, people may begin to look forward to their own death. I see it as a win-win. Either there is an afterlife and I will see my loved ones again, or there is not, and ceasing to exist means I will no longer suffer. Even without loss, life can grow wearisome, and physical pain often comes with age. My grandmother was in so much pain in her last years that she was practically begging for it to end. Story 104. As long as my loved ones are okay, I am fine with dying. I was not alive for whatever time existed before my birth, so not being alive seems okay. Story 105. I'm only 46. I'm the oldest member of my family. Hell, even my cousins are gone. Some of their children are still alive. Most of my friends have died. One day you're here, the next day you're gone. Make the most of it and enjoy it while it lasts. But don't worry about it. Story 106. I have more deceased people listed in my phone than living people, and I am not even 50. It sucks. I should have died long before some of the amazing people I have known. You kind of get used to it. Death is just another thing. The closer they are, the harder it is. That never changes. Story 107. I just try not to take it too personally. We are all in this together. Story 108. You can live between angst and panic if you think it will help. Story 109. After 70 years of nonsense, some people are ready to go quietly into the night. Story 110. I think of it like being asleep or unconscious. There is nothing until you wake up, and then when you fall asleep again, there is nothing. Sooner or later you do not wake up, and I will be dead, so I will not care. If you are thinking about harming yourself, please seek help now. Contact your local emergency services or crisis line. In the US, call 988. I can help find local resources if you want. Story 111. Midlife crisis. It is a real mental health crisis in which a person confronts mortality, values, and the life they have led. It can be terrifying and distressing. People often laugh it off and are embarrassed to admit they are experiencing a midlife crisis. Story 112. I had to be resuscitated several times after I bled internally in a car wreck. Dying might suck, but death is nothing to be afraid of. Story 113. Do not worry about it. It happens to everyone. That is life. Do what you can while you can. I keep looking forward. As long as you care about something, it is worth it. I have seen too many who just stop caring. They do not last long. Ultimately, you make your own choices. Story 114. I searched Google to find when I would die. My magic number is 74, so I have 5 years left. Story 115. I am only in my 20s, but I recently came out of a massive existential crisis in which I began mourning people I am nowhere near losing yet. What helped most was imagining I could die right as I typed this, or in 4.5 minutes. The same is true for others. I am now often thinking about this and realizing how little worrying changes. It will happen, and I cannot do anything about it. I know I would not want to panic in my last moments, and I would not want anyone else to either. Just love and be loved. That is all you can do. For me, most anxiety about death is about the aftermath. I am not so worried about the dying itself. I feel the body would make it as comfortable as possible. Most people tend to have a peaceful moment when they pass. I do not understand why some people fear ghosts. The possibility of something else would improve my disposition. I do not believe in any gods. I would like to believe in reincarnation. Realistically, the only way you live on is through matter, which cannot be destroyed until perhaps all of existence ends billions of years from now and possibly begins again with another Big Bang. Story 116. I am in my late 50s and have no interest in a long life. Story 117. I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Woody Allen. Story 118. I am not afraid of death or of what may or may not come after. I am curious. What I am afraid of is how I will die. I do not want to suffer an agonizing, extremely painful death or be alone and sad. Story 119. Most of the time, I'm pretty comfortable with the idea of death. But every now and then, a strange sense of dread and loss comes over me if I think too much about my bones at night while I'm lying in bed. Story 120. I am starting to believe you stress less about things as you get older. There was a time when I was so self-conscious I would not even leave the house. Now I really do not care. As you get older, you fear death less. My grandfather told me he was more afraid of being alone than of dying. Story 121. They mentally check out. They give up the fight for life. I feel the body stops functioning to the point that self-autonomy is lost and you become dependent on caregivers until you end up in a care home. I feel we all want to be put out of our misery when that happens. Story 122. I am not dead. I get hungry, sleepy, and horny. I deal with those things. Why would I lose my mind? Story 123. Many times you are in so much pain, physically and mentally to varying degrees, that the prospect does not sound terrible. Story 124. Personally, I've accepted that we will all die eventually. I've convinced myself to trust one certainty. Everything will end, the good and the bad, and I'm at peace with that. Story 125. Religion and faith are how people make peace with their own mortality. Story 126. Death. Wow. Yikes. It's so hard to bear when the few people you cannot live without die. You will never get over these losses, and no matter what the culture says, you're not supposed to. We Christians like to think of death as a major change of address. But in any case, the person will live again fully in your heart if you don't seal it off. Like Leonard Cohen said, there are cracks in everything, and that's how the light gets in. That's how we feel our people fully alive again. Also, the beloved departed will make you laugh out loud at the most inconvenient times. And that's the great good news. But their absence will also be a lifelong nightmare of homesickness for you. Grief, friends, time, and tears will heal you to some extent. Tears will bathe, baptize, hydrate, and moisturize you and the ground on which you walk. Do you know the first thing God says to Moses? He says, "Take off your shoes, because this is holy ground, despite all evidence to the contrary." It's hard to believe, but it's the truest thing I know. When you're a little bit older, like my tiny personal self, you realize death is as sacred as birth. Don't worry. Get on with your life. Almost every death is easy and gentle, with the very best people surrounding you. For as long as you need, you won't be alone. They will help you cross over to whatever awaits us. As Ram Dass said, when it's all said and done, we're all really just walking each other home. And Lamont, Story 127. It's not just an issue of age but of culture. Many people on this website were raised in cultures that never discuss death properly, ignoring it or pushing it aside until they cannot anymore. Death should be accepted and understood, not feared, from a young age. I remember when I was a child and had my first existential crisis when I realized I would die one day or any day. My aunt sat me down and talked with me. Death simply is. I am now fascinated by it. I worked with the dead and their stories, and it is very peaceful. Story 128. I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. I'm concerned for your safety. Are you thinking about ending your life or planning to harm yourself? If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number now, for example, 911 in the United States. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or text HOME to 741741 to reach the Crisis Text Line. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or a local suicide prevention hotline. I can help you find support, contact someone you trust, or continue editing this text. Would you like that? The older I get, the more I accept reality for what it is, including that my death could come at any time. I only hope I do not suffer much or end my life. Story 129. I am not even 40 yet, but I vividly recall one night more than 30 years ago when I freaked out about death. My mother came into my bedroom and reassured me that while I will die eventually, I have many more years before that will happen. It seemed scary then, even though the age gap between her and me was so large, and she was not panicking about death. Now, seeing that, I likely have roughly the same number of years ahead as there were between that night and today, and how fantastically different things are from when I was that young child. I am pretty okay with that. I will not pretend my life is perfect or that it turned out as I expected, but I am relatively healthy and reasonably happy, and I really cannot expect much more than that. That is okay. Story 130. Some of us do not mind the sweet release of nothingness after the trauma we have suffered and the reality we know. Story 131. At some point in life, you realize you were born, and from that moment you began dying. You either do not care and live your life, or you create ridiculous anxiety about it and post it on Reddit. Story 132. Living a meaningful legacy worthy of passing on to your children and grandchildren, or to society in general, gives life purpose. People who are not ready to let go are often full of resentment, having lived unfulfilled lives marked by greed and selfishness. They lose sight of life's true meaning, develop a false sense of invincibility, and crave possessions and power. The contentment of leaving your mark, making a genuine contribution, and recognizing your importance, however small, through self-actualization brings peace to most older people. Story 133. Well, what are you going to do? I do not see any other options. I suppose if I had children it would be different, but since I do not, I am just trying to put as much good work as I can out there, although nobody will be able to read it in 50 years or so. Story 134. Death is not the end. There is nothing to fear. Story 135. Older adults have experienced a great deal of life and many face disease or disability as they age, with some living in pain and suffering. They have likely loved and lost many friends and family along the way. I am only 30, but since my mother died I have felt ready to die at any time, though only when it is my time. I hate this world without her. I do not enjoy life as I used to. There is a constant pit in my heart. I hope to live many more years and accomplish many things, but part of me will be sad every day until then. Story 136. I'm not old, but I am 41 and I know it's coming. Honestly, I have to stop thinking about it because it makes me a bit panicky. I know my uncle is very afraid. He's 80 but in pretty good shape and he knows it's coming too. He has been making an effort to see the rest of the family more frequently and sharing a lot of wisdom and advice. Some people have no issue accepting death, but I certainly do. The thought of not existing and falling asleep to never wake up again is terrifying to me. But we don't really have much of a choice. Story 137. Iba ang pananauka sa kamatayan. May teora ako nakapagpatay ka na. Sara na iyon ay may isisilang na sanggewel at dun papasok ang kaluluwa mo. Pareng ka pa rin iyon, parehong espiritu, pareho ang paraan ng pag-isip at ugali. Ngunit nasa ibang katan ka na. At dahil hindi mo na maalala kung saan ka nanggaling, bagong ka na iyon. Iba. Na MJ magulang mo at ibang tao ka na. Bakit ko ganyang lagi ang fiko na ating buhay? Para sa akin, balang kamatayan. Ang kamatayan ay umiraw lamang para sa MJ buhay pa kasi alam nila na patay na ang tao. Ngunit ang taong namatay mismo ay hindi malalaman iyon dahil mapupunta siya sa panibagong katajan at katauhan. Ivan, baka nababaliw na ako. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.